Don't worry, kids. The key to looking good in a scarf is just having the confidence that you will look good in a scarf. Just think cowboy and go. You want to embrace your inner theatre kid. Embrace. Hello humans, my name is Dael Kingsmill, and welcome to 2020. I refuse to believe that we're not getting a do-over for that. This is, do-overs, I like do-overs. Do-overs are good. This video is a do-over. I recorded it last week, and I didn't like it, so I'm doing it again. 2021, year of the do-over. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about D&D! You've read the title. You already know that this is a video about travel, because I've been thinking about it again. There's been a weird influx of new views on the old video, and I'm not sure if I necessarily stand by everything I said in that old video anymore. And on top of that, I actually have a travel session coming up in my home game if and when we ever play again. So many of us have talked about travel, have tried to work out how to make travel interesting, and we never quite nail it. Spoiler alert, we still won't after this video. Just a heads up. But after giving it a lot of thought, I think that part of the trouble is that we keep conflating travel and exploration. So in D&D in particular, we talk about the three pillars, right? Combat, that's the big one, roleplay, and exploration. These are the things that we kind of have as scaffolding of rules to help us achieve within the game. They're the three big things that any D&D game is supposed to be made out of. And so we get to talking about overland travel, or travel in general, and we're like, there's like no rules here. There's nothing for it. And I do think that that's true. I just think that we've kind of expected there to be stuff because exploration is covered, and surely travel and exploration are the same thing. They're not the same thing. Where's my phone? I actually wrote notes for this video. Where? Oh, it's in my hand. It's in my hand. Found it. What do these notes mean? What does this mean? All right, so I think that the big trick to making travel good or exploration good is going to end up being knowing which thing you're wanting to achieve and then boiling down the techniques of that thing so that you can achieve it. So if we're talking about travel, we talk about travel meaning the passage of time and distance that nonetheless remains sort of thematically and narratively focused. You're going somewhere with a clear purpose. You might face obstacles on the way, but in general, you know where you're going, or at least what you're going to. I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I'm going to say that I think that most modern D&D games follow this model. So what are some examples of some travel-themed fantasy or fantastical text? Well, you got the really glaringly obvious one, Middle-earth. Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and it kind of serves as the model for a lot of fantasy books or fantasy movies. Willow, Del Toro Quest, even Shrek, really. So for example, let's look at Willow. In Willow, the path is meandering, but they're always going somewhere. You have to take the baby to the Daikini Crossroads. Go find the sorceress, Finrasel. We must make our way to Tiris Lin for safety. P.S. How good are those names? Really good naming in Willow. There is always a lot of purpose and intent to wherever it is that they're going next. Exploration also involves the passing of time and space, but to a certain degree the point of it is the unexpected and the uncertain. Here we're talking about treasure hunters delving into a dungeon, frontier mercenaries hired to tame the surrounding wilderness, a Mad Max style wandering hero who just ends up in different scraps and different situations here and there wherever they go. I could be wrong here, but it seems to me that D&D games that use a lot of exploration are more likely to be about exploration. West Marches are a really good example of this type of game. Pop cultural examples of exploration-focused stuff. Age of Empires, Stellaris, Skyrim, a lot of video games in this category. Not only video games though, Dinotopia, not the movie with, Wentworth Miller before he could act, and also that guy from Being Erica who looks like that guy from Entourage. Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I actually haven't gotten the chance to read this yet, but both my sisters have, and they really loved it. And I mean, you've heard me recommend Jonathan Strange and Mr. Knurl enough times that this may as well just be a Susanna Clarke stan account. I have it on good authority that this entire book is kind of exploration-y stuff. Go buy the book. I just wanted to have money. You know what I mean? Fantasties by George MacDonald. Or, more properly, Fantasties, a fairy romance for men and women. The techniques of exploration are more about, wandering without knowing where you're going, seeing what you find. Oh, actually, you know what that does remind me of? That reminds me of, upon the hearth the fire is red, beneath the roof there is a bed, but not yet weary are our feet, still round the corner we may meet a sudden tree or standing stone, that none have seen but we alone. Tree and flower and leaf and grass, let them pass, let them pass. Hill and water under sky, pass them by, pass them by. Still round the corner there may wait a new road or a secret gate. And though we pass them by today, tomorrow we may come this way, and take the hidden paths that run towards the moon, or to the sun. This is the walking song from early on in Fellowship of the Ring. I shouldn't have done that. I never learned not to throw things. But you know, it's that spirit of like, let's see what we can find. Let's get caught by our imagination, by some glimmer we see in the distance. And let's follow it, see where it leads. If you've decided, oh, they're just going to the next city over, so this is just travel, how is it going to feel like travel? How's it going to feel? You know, you don't have the benefit of like the sweeping helicopter shots of New Zealand. So how you going to do that? If it's exploration, how are you going to entice your players? So I've got some ideas. Just jotted down a couple ideas. I think key to both is going to be scenic description. Gonna read out a couple of examples for you. This one, this is from My Brother Michael by Mary Stewart. Mary Stewart did the Merlin trilogy. Very good fantasy. If you haven't read it, I recommend it. But also she did a lot of sort of thriller, mystery kind of novels that are very good. So here's a description of some travel from My Brother Michael. The hand of Hermes, god of wayfarers, was over me still. Soon after I had passed Lavadia, the country began to change. The grim banalities of Attica, the heavy technicolor prosperity of the plains sank back and were forgotten as the hills crowded in. The road reared and twisted between great ribs of brown hill that thrust the landscape up into folded ranges. At the foot of the steep, waterless valleys, dead streams curled white along their shingle beds, like the sloughed skin of snakes. The sides of the valleys were dry with the yellowish growth of burned grass and drifts of stones and crumbling soil. Bigger and bigger grew the circling hills, barer the land, drawn in with great sweeps of colour that ran from red to ochre, from ochre to burnt umber to lion tawny, with, above all, the burning, the limitless, the lovely light. And beyond all, at length, a grey ghost of a mountain massif, not purple, not faintly blue with distance like the mountains of a softer country, but spectre white, magnificent, a lion silvered, Parnassus, home of the ghosts of the old gods. But no ghosts moved today, no sound, no breath, not even the shadow of a hanging hawk, only the bare, lion-coloured hills, and the illimitable, merciless light. Ooh, isn't that nice? She's very good at description. So good that my mother, who doesn't like reading description, the first time she was handing me a Mary Stewart book, said, skip the first chapter, she's just describing flowers. Got another little excerpt here from The Hobbit. Would feel remiss not to include some Tolkien. They did not sing or tell stories that day, even though the weather improved, nor the next day, nor the day after. They had begun to feel that danger was not far away on either side. They camped under the stars, and their horses had more to eat than they had, for there was plenty of grass, but there was not much in their bags, even with what they had gotten from the trolls. One morning they forded a river at a wide, shallow place full of noise, of stones and foam. The far bank was steep and slippery. When they got to the top of it, leading their ponies, they saw that the great mountains had marched down very near to them. Already they seemed only a day's easy journey from the feet of the nearest. Dark and drear it looked, though there were patches of sunlight on its brown sides, and behind its shoulders the tip of snow peaks gleamed. It was not as easy as it sounds to find that last homely house west of the mountains. There seemed to be no trees and no valley and no hills to break the ground in front of them. Only one vast slope going slowly up and up to meet the feet of the nearest mountain. A wide land the colour of heather and crumbling rock, with patches and slashes of grass green and moss green showing where water might be. Morning passed, afternoon came, but in all the silent waste there was no sign of any dwelling. They were growing anxious, for they saw now that the house might be hidden almost anywhere between them and the mountains. They came on unexpected valleys, narrow with steep sides that opened suddenly at their feet, and they looked down surprised to see trees below them and running water at the bottom. There were gullies that they could almost leap over, but very deep with waterfalls in them. There were dark ravines that one could neither jump over nor climb into. There were bogs, some of them green pleasant places to look at with flowers growing bright and tall, but a pony that walked there with a pack on its back would never have come out again. And I mean, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings are obviously, I just threw another one. They're so full of this descriptive, momentum-driving language. None of us are expecting any of us to be able to write out descriptions like that, but I do think that we can look at them and we can learn some things from the techniques that they're using. So, first step, I do recommend writing down your travel descriptions and just reading them out verbatim. You might not be a person who takes many notes. Maybe you can, ad-lib these on the fly. In which case, I'm so proud of you. For those of us who are human, I think writing it down is a good idea. Get flowery, get purple. So what are some techniques that they're using? Just to pull out a couple really obvious ones off the top of my head. A lot of the language that these writers are using is deliberately personifying the landscape. The mountains had crept closer to them. The hills crowded about them. Or maybe an animalize. What's the animal version of personifying? Making an inanimate thing into animals. The riverbeds that were like the sloughed skins of snakes, right? In the Mary Stewart example, we get a great bit of, she's throwing in lore there. It's not technically her own lore, she's throwing in references to Greek mythology, but maybe you could use this as a chance to throw in little tiny snippets of the lore of your world. Be a bit wary with that. It definitely works better as a technique if your players know what you're referencing, because that's how intertextuality works. Colors. A lot of colors were being brought up in each of those examples. One tricksy technique that I think could work is Scott McCloud in Understanding Comics, aspect to aspect transitions. What that means is basically you're looking at the one scene and it focuses in on different details of that one scene. So he says here, while talking about aspect to aspect, he says, aspect to aspect transitions have been an integral part of Japanese mainstream comics almost from the very beginning. Most often used to establish a mood or a sense of place, time seems to stand still in these quiet, contemplative combinations. Rather than acting as a bridge between separate moments, the reader here must assemble a single moment using scattered fragments. Now, I think that can be useful to us in our written descriptions. Sounds a bit weird applying a visual technique to the written word, but if you think about it, the way that these sort of traveling descriptions are written, it really does a very similar thing. It gives you the landscape, and then in order to emphasize the depth and the breadth of that landscape as you're passing through it, it focuses in on little things. The bubbling of a stream, the color of a hill, a hawk hanging overhead in the sky. Now, I do think that there would be a bit of a difference in the way that you write these if you're writing for travel or writing for exploration. For example, if you look at the Fellowship of the Ring, a lot of the travel between Hobbiton and Rivendell, Tolkien has this habit, he sort of develops kind of a rhythm to his descriptions where he'll give you little sort of tight-packed segments of travel description, and then he'll cut into that with what in D&D we would call an encounter. It might be a simple encounter, it might be a complex encounter, but he kind of cuts into that rhythm and in between focuses on these really detailed aspect-to-aspect descriptions. We'll touch more on this in a little bit. Exploration, on the other hand, I think there should be a focus on enticement. There's a technique in YouTube actually that's called information deficit. Basically, you pull people onwards by creating a lack of information. On YouTube, this is basically clickbait. You give your video a title like, 5 things you didn't know about warthogs, and either the person will be like, you know what, I don't know enough about warthogs, please teach me. But more commonly, the videos will get clicks from people who are like, don't you assume what I know, but they have to watch the video to find out what the 5 things are about warthogs to find out whether they know them. So just by giving it that title, you make the person aware that they don't know something, whether that thing be the information about the warthogs or whether it be the content of the video, right? There's a little happy YouTube lesson, but the way that would work in this case, the reason I'm bringing this up is that when it comes to exploration, if you tell someone, oh, there's a ruin up ahead of a windmill or a church, that's cool, they might want to go and explore it, but you've kind of given them the information. There is nothing about a ruined church that tells them that something exciting lies within. As far as they know, they've got all the information. So you want to create descriptions that leave these little bits of, ooh, what is that, for your players? You know, a glimmer off the next ridge, something shining that catches the sun, smoke rising in the east, a great hulking shadow moving through the mist, or maybe an eerie song that's carried to them on the night breeze. Make sure that your descriptions are including things that almost make them want to divert off course. Because that's what explorations are about, baby! Resource management. Alright, for exploration, resource management is huge. A lot of those exploration-based video games that I mentioned earlier use resource management as kind of their core puzzle element to make exploration fun or challenging. Ideally both. You know, you're playing Age of Empires and you start with only this tiny little bit of the map illuminated. The rest is covered in the fog of war. You have to send out scouts in order to start discovering what is around you. But making scouts takes resources that you could be using on other things. So then you want to use your scouts to find a place with more resources so you can set up another place so that you can make more scouts. You see what I mean? And in your tabletop RPG, you can start to play with those dials as well. The dials that stand out to me as being really significant to consider would be time, rations, carrying capacity, and character stuff. You know, spells, health, whatever. For exploration in particular, I think that's where you're really going to want to dig into things like rationing and carrying capacity. You know, if you're a treasure hunter delving into the dungeons, you're going to want to make sure that you have enough torches and food to get yourself there and back again. And carrying capacity is going to be a big deal as well, because how much are you able to actually take back with you? You have to balance how many rations you bring, because they're going to take up space, with the stuff that you're going to be able to bring back, the spoils of your adventure. There's a game called 5 Torches Deep, which is an independent sort of, it's basically a reintroduction of OSR elements to 5e mechanical structure. It's got a lot of cool stuff going on, but like a huge part of its premise comes from this idea of like, you're 5 torches deep in a dungeon. Are you gonna have enough torches to get back? What happens if something goes wrong? What if you're cut off from the path that you took here? You don't know how long the return journey's gonna take. And that same thing applies to like food as well. If, you know, we've set up these descriptions of the shinies and the smoke and whatever. We're enticing our players off in different directions. If they have planned an 8-day journey, 4 days in, 4 days back to town, if they get to day 3, day 4, and they see something just a little bit further ahead, are you going to be able to entice them to push their resources just a little bit further than they had planned? If they do end up in these sticky situations, are they going to be able to forage for food? Exploration, I think you really get a lot more out of a more granular approach to resource management. That doesn't mean that it has to be like super detailed or mathematical or anything, but just putting even a little bit of effort into tracking carrying capacity, tracking the passage of time, tracking the use of your supplies, because then it really becomes part of this risk reward nature of the exploration model. Travel, I would say, I personally would take a much simpler approach. I think the stuff to track when doing travel over exploration is like maybe focus on time and maybe on character stuff. My current method, for example, I have my own kind of take on the gritty realism mechanic. If you don't happen to be familiar, in the Dungeon Master's Guide there is a variant rule that you can use called gritty realism, which basically it replaces short rest and long rest. So ordinarily a short rest takes 1 hour, a long rest takes 8 hours. If you're using gritty realism, the change that it makes is that a short rest is 8 hours, a long rest is a week. And it's meant to reflect, you know, you can't just heal overnight and all those things. Kind of cut down on that video gamey element of taking long rests, where players will be like, oh, well, we're about to face the boss battle, we should heal up, let's camp outside and just, I guess the boss will wait for us. My take on this is actually quite different. Short rest is still 1 hour, long rest is still 8 hours, but while traveling, a long rest doesn't restore hit points and only restores half of your level in spell slots. So like you can still heal, you can still use your hit dice to heal, you can still use potions or spells or, you know, character, anything to heal, except that you do not get hit points from a long rest. And with regards to spell slots, it's like, you know, if you're level 4, you wake up after a long rest and you can choose to restore either 1 second level spell slot, or you can choose to restore 2 first level spell slots. Because I do like the idea of travel feeling like a cumulative experience. You know, it's not just like, oh, you have this fight, and then you have this other fight, and you can go nova in any version of them. No, you know, the effects of this fight will linger into the next one. But I also don't want it to be like a huge deal. You could play with rations and stuff for travel. I don't. To me, it's not the most important thing. If it's your jam, if you like doing it, then go for it. It's not going to wreck it by any means. But if it's not your favorite thing, then you can skip it. It's not going to harm anything either. And the final section, encounters and party interactions. Exploration, this is where we get the most tools that we have for exploration. Random encounter tables, baby! Always, I've been like, I like the idea of a random encounter table, but it just doesn't feel right sticking it into the middle of my journey. It makes no sense. It doesn't fit with the story and what's going on. And it's just one and done and forgotten about forever. You know why? Because I was trying to shove it into travel. It belongs in exploration. It is such a beautiful fit and match to exploration, where the point of it is the uncertain and the unexpected. Monster attacks, bandit tolls, flash floods, mysterious castles that appear overnight. Oh, random encounters were built for this. Use all of them. Oh, I did have one other idea that I think could be cool. I've never tried it, but I think it could be cool. The idea was that if you happen to be someone who loves like doing world building and sort of planning the setting ahead of time, and you've just got so much more designed than your players will ever be able to encounter, or it would even work even if you just have the local region kind of mapped out. You've got your players there in their starting position, and you have a map in front of you, and it's like face down on different tiles, and they pick a direction to go in, and as they travel, you flip the tile and they find out what's on the map as they go. It doesn't have to be a drawing. You could easily write what's in different places on index cards and have them face down and have it be sort of an abstract system. You know, the cards are in the general direction and you flip and it's just words, but it kind of feels like a map. I don't know, I think there's something in that. Now with travel, like I said at the beginning, travel is more narratively and thematically focused. You're not forgetting what your current quest is in the middle of travel. You're traveling to the Daikini crossroads to get rid of the baby. So having random things happen in the middle of it doesn't really serve that story. First thing that I will say is plan out your travel just like any session. You've got your session plan, you plan it out. Travel is exactly the same. Plan it like you would a dungeon. It is that easy. But, more thoughts. I was saying earlier, Tolkien has this kind of these sections of beautiful landscape description interspersed with what we would call encounters. Different kinds of encounters. You know, that the hobbits have to hide from the Black Riders on the road. There's like a skill check, a little stealth check in there. They have roleplay encounters here and there with Farmer Maggot or Barlam and Butterbur. They have combat encounters with the Barrow-wights and with the Nazgul at Weathertop. There's that rhythm to the progress and to the obstacles. And through that rhythm, you can control the intensity of the story you're telling through travel. Let it play into the narrative. At the beginning, it's just stealth checks and roleplay. And at this end, it's getting poisoned by a poisoned ghost dagger and having to race across the river in time. Some of these encounters that Tolkien includes, you'll notice, are just inter-party interactions. And these are beautiful. Covering distance is something that the party of characters spend probably most of their time doing. This is when they would be doing the most of their like bonding and talking stuff. And to me, it seems like a very unfortunate event if you have to skip over that stuff. It should feel a little bit like a road trip with pals. Just a little. You know, Fellowship of the Ring, how much of that trip from Hobbiton to Rivendell is them singing walking songs? I mean, come on. Stop and have a meal. Get a little bit drunk on fairy juice and laugh at what losers the ring wraiths are. I do think that there is a tendency for us all to think that D&D sort of has to be improv. And of course, a lot of it is. I'm not saying it isn't, but it doesn't have to be pure improv. We're not improv people. What are improv people called? Players? Comedians? But here's one of the greatest pieces of D&D advice that I've ever heard. I was at Oz Comic Con and Jazz organized this panel of D&D stuff. She helps run D&D New South Wales. And during that panel, someone asked, If you have players who are hesitant to roleplay, how do you encourage them to get into that? Now, of course, if we're talking about players who are really uncomfortable roleplaying, who are shy, who don't want to do it, don't make them do it. Don't make them do it. But if it's just like you have players who are happy to give it a go, but they just... It's always awkward to get it in there. Jazz's advice was the best thing. She said, I contact them ahead of the session and I say, hey, I would really like to see you play out a scene about this thing. And that blew my mind, because that's it. They don't have to script anything out ahead of time. They shouldn't script out anything ahead of time, but it just lets them think about it. It just gets to stew in their brain for a while, and when they go to say it during the session, they have some general idea of the shape of the scene. So you can do that. You can get in touch with your players and you can say, hey, Daniel and Kiara, these are two of my players. I know that they get along great as people, as friends, and I know that their characters have a little bit of comical tension. So I might get in contact with them and I might say, hey, when the party settle down to make camp at the end of the night, I'd really like to see a fun little scene where you two argue about something. Would you be interested in that? If they say no, no skin off your nose. But if they're interested, if they want to do it, then you've just given them time to consider it. As the sun sets, the party begin to unpack their bags, roll out their sleeping rolls, divvy up the jobs for the evening. Gesture to Daniel and Kiara, they have their little moment of roleplay. You get that little bit of like party banter, party bonding. I really love the walking songs that keep popping up in the Fellowship of the Ring. And my party has a bard, Jinx, played by my friend Dolly, who she back in the before times attended a lot of sea shanty gatherings and folk festivals. So she knows a lot of folk songs, and she sings those as Jinx when she's casting spells or, you know, being a bard, doing bard do. So I might think to myself, wouldn't it be nice to have a sort of a walking song moment? And I might contact Dolly and say, hey, do you know a song about traveling? Would you be up to singing that as part of this travel session tomorrow? Organize with her a cue. When I begin to talk about how tired everyone is, Jinx is suddenly reminded of an old song.
Sing ho for a brave and a gallant ship with a fair and favouring breeze, with a bully crew and a captain too, to carry me o'er the seas. To carry me o'er the seas, me boys, to my true love far away. I'm taking a trip on a rickety ship 10,000 miles away.
I literally got in contact with Dolly and said, hey, would you be willing to do a song about traveling for a D&D thing? And she said yes. Talk to your players. You can have the, isn't communication wonderful when you actually do it? And through these things you can begin to acknowledge past events that have happened in the game that the characters, the players might have talked about it, but the characters maybe haven't had a chance to sit down and debrief about it. You can use it to acknowledge changes in the group over time. Character progression. It's all in travel, folks. So these are my personal breakdowns of the techniques for travel and the techniques for exploration, and how you can make them feel different to one another, and how you can make them feel like what they're meant to be. Obviously, there are other ways of handling this that work for a lot of people. Montage travel from the Middle Earth RPG. I don't actually know which Lord of the Rings-y tabletop RPG it is, but that one that has the montage travel. Great little system. Z Bashu has a great video on how he runs travel. That sounds like it would be fun. A lot of people totally skip travel, and that works fine for them, because that's not the meat of it for their game. But these are just my specific musings on what I would do if I maybe was trying to make the passage of 3 hours feel like the passage of 3 days, without it getting boring, tedious, or off message. Because I think that there is value in that sort of road trip quality, as well as in the quality of the hardships of the wilds. Anyway, I hope that you found some of that. That was very, it was almost Muppety in... Anyway, hi! I hope that you found some of that useful, even just a little bit of it that can inspire you to come up with your own system, your own, what works for you for travel in your D&D game. I just choked on my spit. Whew. I'm extremely attractive. Apart from that, I do believe that's it. I'm done. Email this to your grandma, and I'll see you some other time.
And it's blow me winds high-ho, a roving I will go. I'll stay no more on this old shore to hear the music play. For I'm off on the bounding main, and I won't be back again. I'm taking a trip on a rickety ship 10,000 miles away.
Ugh, I just felt a literal, like a drip of sweat travel down my torso. Ugh, gross. Aren't you glad I shared that information with you?